Welcome, everyone. Good morning. Welcome again to another EHPA event. My name is Dan Stefanica, your usual host in these projects events. And I'm joined by my colleague Irene. She's always helping us with the technical things. It's a very unappreciated work because you don't see her, but believe me, she's the one that makes this really, really possible. I'm just the talking face here. It's a pleasure to have you here this morning. And again, yet another event made by us. Always a pleasure to have you. And let's see if I can change the slides, eh? Not, yes. So a little bit of, let me see, a little bit of, housekeeping rules. It's been a few years since we've been in the pandemic. Everyone knows Zoom, Teams, all the things. But just a reminder, you can interact with everyone, with all the participants, with all the panelists. And there are two main ways of doing this. You can either use the Q&A box, if you wish, or you can use the chat box. If you use the chat box, just make sure you have the option set that it's for all panelists and attendees. Otherwise, by default, it's all panelists. So the other attendees cannot see your questions. So it will be a bit weird for them when we're talking about your questions. So choose whichever you want. Personally, I like the chat more. The webinar will be recorded, is being recorded right now. It will always be available on the EHPA YouTube channel, and the recording along with the presentations will be sent to all of you that participate, all of you that have actually registered. Something else to keep in mind is, of course, that we're using a lot of QR codes. So sometimes you will see a QR code on the screen. The QR code takes you to a link that we are discussing during the presentation. The best way to scan that QR code is with your phone. I'm pretty sure we have a little bit of experience nowadays with QR codes. Let's see if it works to change again. Yes. So a little bit about the agenda. It'll be a little bit of a very, very short welcome and introduction from me. Then it will be some introductory remarks from Luca Angelino, Project Advisor, European Climate Infrastructure and Environment Executive Agency at the European Commission. Then we will have a small presentation of the Heat Pump for All project made by Pauric O'Reilly, head of the development unit at TUS. Afterwards, there'll be a panel discussion with 4 participants, Julie Buffy, Secretary General at Europe On, Jean Kronvik, Educational Technologist and Program Manager of EU Project at ISSO, Carlos Garcia Delgado, Head of Building and Construction Sector within CTA, and our very own Secretary General, Thomas Novak. We will also talk a little bit about the work that we're doing as part of Heat Pump for All, and in particular, the competency framework that we're doing for it. So nothing has changed since you have registered. So a quick welcome, because I know that Luca has a very busy schedule, so we don't want to keep him waiting here, of course. So just a little bit about the event. As you know, skills, upskilling, reskilling are very, very important topics nowadays. The European Heat Pump Association has identified skills development and the demands associated with them as being crucial for the EU market, especially given the recent geopolitical, let's say, happenings in the neighborhood, especially since we want to transition to, renewable heating and cooling as soon as possible. And especially since we want the fossil fuel heating devices that you have to be replaced by a far more efficient and sustainable heat pump. So given that heat pumps are, their part in the transition is becoming critical, they're a critical component of low energy and near zero energy buildings. We think that, of course, the people that need to install them, design them, maintain them, talk to the customers, also need to be reskilled, upskilled, and they need to, of course, always provide to the customer the best services possible, as well as, of course, don't continue on the same road of suggesting the same solution, which in many cases is a fossil fuel boiler, but give the customer options and be confident in the installation of heat pumps or other sources of heating and cooling. So towards this end, we are very happy to be partners in the Heat Pump for All project, along with partners from Spain, Ireland, and Austria. And this project is very, very interesting, and it's all about skills, reskilling, upskilling, all along the value chain of heat pump manufacturing, design, maintenance, installation. So with that, we EHPA are responsible for also preparing a competency framework, and this event is made in the framework of that. We want to hear the opinions of experts, the opinions of organizations that are working in this field, of organizations that are working in other EU-funded projects that relate to skills and upskilling. And of course, we want to hear inputs from you, the participants. Okay, let's try to change the slide again. Almost. Bear with me. It's Zoom. I'm going to blame it on it. Yes. Unfortunately, sorry, Irene, you have to take control. I'm having problems. Like I said, Irene always saves us. So just to let you know that this event is also part of the European Vocational Skills Week. This is an annual week celebrating all the very best practices in vocational education and training. You have a QR code on the screen. So if you had your phone ready, you will be able to scan it. This will take you to the European Vocational Skills Week page, and you can find a lot of other events there, a lot of other initiatives related to skills and upskilling and vocational education and training. They also have the flagship VET Excellence Awards that will be on the 18th of May. So have a look, because I'm sure there are a lot of other events. There's a lot of other interesting initiatives. And this is also interesting because this event is happening every year. So if you're passionate about vocational education, about skills, reskilling, upskilling, and so on, then probably this event is something that you would probably like to attend. I think this year it's a hybrid event, so participation is made very easy. So with that being said, it is my pleasure to introduce Luca Angelino from the EU Commission. Luca is a project advisor with the European Commission's Climate, Infrastructure and Environment Executive Agency, or CINEA, established in April 2021. He has experience working with EU institutions, international organizations, and industry associations to support the market uptake of sustainable energy solutions in developed and emerging economies. Prior to joining the Commission services from 2017 to 2020, he worked with the International Renewable Energy Agency, IRENA, an intergovernmental organization based in the United Arab Emirates. At CINEA, Luca oversees a portfolio of EU-funded projects and service contracts from the Clean Energy Transitions Sub-Program of LIFE, the EU program for the Environment and Climate Action, as well as the legacy of Horizon 2020's energy efficiency projects. So welcome, Luca. Thank you so much for your work. As beneficiaries of EU funding, we are very, very happy to have you here, and we're very happy with the Commission's work on Horizon 2020, Horizon Europe, the LIFE sub-program and energy transition, and so on. The floor is yours. Virtual floor and virtual microphone is yours, please.
Thank you, Dan, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for this kind introduction and for this invitation. It's really appreciated. So today we're going to discuss measures to advance skills and competencies in the heat pump sector, and this meeting could not be more timely We are facing multiple crises. First, it's been already some time, in a deep climate crisis to which the EU responded in many ways, including in 2019 with the European Green Deal. One of the key pillars you may know identified in the Green Deal is making buildings more and renovations, of course, more energy and resource efficient. As one of the follow-ups from the Green Deal, the renovation wave strategy, which was unveiled back in October 2020, set the objective to refurbish 35 million building units by the end of this decade. With the Fit for 55 package, the Commission is aiming to reform, to align the EU regulatory framework to the new greenhouse gas emission target by 2030. And in that context, the revision of the Renewable Energy Directive, unveiled in July 2021, brought forward some proposals for more ambitious measures to mainstream renewable energy in both buildings and heating and cooling. The second crisis, it's been a few months now, we have been hit by rising energy prices in Europe very heavily. The European Central Bank estimated before the war in Ukraine that energy prices shocks would reduce the GDP growth by around 0.5% only this year. And continued high energy prices will affect especially the poor and business competitiveness. The third crisis, the war and the geopolitical crisis, unveiled, if it was not sufficiently clear yet, our heavy and also painful dependency on fossil fuels, and especially imports of natural gas from unreliable sources. The EU imports 90% of its gas consumption, and Russia provides 40% of it. We're also very well aware that a large share of that natural gas is being used for heating purposes, heating being the largest end-use sector in Europe. In this framework, in March 2022, the Commission proposed Repower EU, a new plan to make Europe independent from Russian fossil fuels well before the end of this decade, starting precisely with natural gas. And in that framework, of course, heat pumps have been identified as one of the key solutions to address this crisis. With Repower EU, we have a new objective of installing 10 million new units of heat pumps in the next 5 years. That would save 12 billion cubic meters of natural gas in the next years. The Commission in that framework also acknowledged that accelerating the deployment of heat pumps in the market will require some more actions, including, and this is the topic of today's discussion, reskilling and upskilling the workforce, which are essential steps to take for this process. Despite what we can see as a very promising outlook, we don't have to underestimate or forget the challenges ahead. Quality of installations, confidence of end users, for instance, are crucial aspects. And in that regard, this project, EHP for All, has a really important role to play. EHP for All started in September 2020 and is addressing really important market barriers for the uptake of heat pumps, addressing both the supply and the demand side. In particular, the project aims to enable capacity and skills development across the supply side, so manufacturers, designers, installers, you name it, and to increase also demand of skills and skilled professionals in the field. Among other things, EHP for All will develop a so-called HP for All package composed of a heat pump competency framework, which was already highlighted by our previous speaker, to facilitate mutual recognition of skills and competencies along the value chain. Regarding the demand side, the project will develop, among other things, a digital knowledge hub dedicated to end users, so addressing the demand side with the objective to increase confidence of end users. So we're talking here building owners, facility managers, property developers, so on and so on, to enable the consideration of skills, quality of installations, starting from 3 pilot countries: Austria, Ireland, and Spain. The project really is part of a family, a group of projects, as we like to call, under the umbrella of the Build Up Skills initiative, which has funded a number of projects really aiming to boost demand for skills and skilled workers in the construction sector, starting from 2019 and 2020. It's part of a broader initiative. We continue to work and we continue to support the Build Up Skills initiative and the development of solutions addressing market uptake barriers under the Clean Energy Transition Sub-Program of the LIFE program under the next, or the current, I would say, multi-annual financial framework until 2027. So with a first call in 2021, we expect to finance projects aiming to launch or relaunch national platforms, bringing together key stakeholders, carrying out new skills gap analysis in the field up to 2030, and elaborating the national roadmap really to bring forward measures to fill the potential gaps up to 2030 in order to achieve the objectives I just mentioned. And these measures will also include digital skills, measures to make the sector more attractive to women, and to reskill workers coming from fossil fuel industries and fossil fuel regions. More opportunity will be available very, very soon. And in that regard, I'm very pleased to invite all of you to the next Info Day, which will take place in 2 weeks from now, on the 20th of May. It will be a virtual event where you will find out more opportunities for financing projects, including in the heat pump sector and in the build-up, for the Build Up Skills initiative. So that being said, ladies and gentlemen, I'm really confident, we're really confident that this event will support boosting the enabling framework for heat pumps, especially in the context of skills and competencies. And without further ado, I'll stop there. I thank you very much again for the invitation, and I wish you a constructive meeting today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Luca. Thank you for taking a bit of time from your very busy schedule to make that very relevant presentation of our project, as well as very relevant presentation of all the factors that have colluded recently to make our project and our area of work so much more relevant. So if you have any questions for Luca, please put them in the chat or the Q&A, and we will make sure that he will get them after the event. Thank you again, Luca. Pleasure to work with you. Yes, please.
Before Luca leaves, I have one very quick question. We have proposed a Reskill EU summit, and rumor has it that the Commission is working on something. Can you share any information, or do you know anything more about that, Luca? And thank you for your presentation.
No, thank you, Thomas. No, I'm not aware or cannot share anything at this stage, but just be tuned and find out more. And just I take this opportunity again. I mentioned the Info Day, so the new call 2022. I just forgot to mention that this will be a virtual event, so information is available online on our website, and I'll be happy to share this with you if needed.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you again for the invitation.
Yeah, I have already registered to that, so I strongly advise the other participants to register, especially again since it's online, so the materials will be very easy to interact with and to access. So thank you again, Luca. Again, if you have any questions for Luca, just put them in the chat or Q&A, and we'll make sure that they reach him. So let's see if I can change the slides now. Well, not really. So I will ask my colleague Irene to change the slides. Actually, I cannot see any slides now, so they just disappeared. But I take the time now. Of course, we're very accustomed with, the online platforms, not, how can I say, not really collaborating with us. So just bear with us. I'm sure we will fix it. But not to waste time, I would like to introduce you to Patrick O'Reilly, that leads the TUS development unit, where projects focus on heat pumps, energy efficiency, climate action, social enterprise, and rural development. Patrick is a mechanical engineer. He has worked in the Irish heat pump industry since 2002, working across residential and larger heat pump projects. It's a pleasure always to have Patrick here. We are now working with TUS, and before we used to work with Limerick Institute of Technology that has become TUS now. Now, I still cannot see the presentation, so I am sure that my colleague is working on that. Yes, because I can see the mouse moving. So just bear with us. You know how it is.
Hey Dan, can you hear me, Dan?
Yes. So we can hear you. It's just I'm waiting for Irene to put the presentation back on. Unfortunately, Zoom sometimes doesn't cooperate.
I can start to.
Yes, sure.
Talk away if you like. I suppose, look, just as first of all, thank you very much for the opportunity to talk this morning. And the Heat Pump for All project is a very important project for us in the development unit within TUS, the Technological University of the Shannon in Ireland. We're acutely aware of the, it's all very well to say that heat pumps are going to be a really important, machine or a piece of equipment to make our heating more renewable. But if it's not done properly, we actually end up in a worse situation, because we have a inefficient use of electricity to produce heat. So and it has been seen in different markets within Europe that there have been false dawns, if you like, where heat pumps have become very popular, but then because of mistakes that have been made, there have been big problems. So that's really what Heat Pump for All is setting out to address, is to make sure that we have a reliable, consistent approach to deploying heat pumps as a technology to bring us into more renewable heating. So the Heat Pump for All project is, we have essentially 3 pilot regions in Ireland, in Austria, and in Spain. Now I don't have my slides, so I can just.
And I cannot share them because it's disabled for me.
Yeah. So look, I mean, it might be no harm. Realistically, what we are trying to do is to understand where the gaps are between what's happening in the market and where the skills are. And we are faced with a labour shortage as well. I think that's also a very important thing to bring to the table. That it's not as though there are, that there's an oversupply of people looking to enter the market. Yeah. We are facing this as a very significant issue. That people, resources and labour are very scarce, and we have very ambitious targets then to deploy large numbers of heat pumps. So we end up with this big challenge. So, if I focus for a moment on the Irish pilot site situation, what we are doing in Ireland is looking at going to local authorities where they have got a mandate to roll out large numbers of heat pumps. We are dealing with the project promoters. And then through those people, we are getting in contact with the installers, the equipment suppliers, and eventually the homeowners. And all along that chain, that value chain, to see where the gaps exist so that we can deliver some insightful training that helps people to really get a system that they understand, and that it is important to note that where people have in the past gauged their energy consumption on how many tanks of oil, for example, or how much natural gas that they consume. Now their energy consumption when they use heat pumps is purely electrical. So this is a big shift. This represents a big shift in their understanding of how energy is consumed. So it's these are all the factors that are at play in the Heat Pump for All project that we are working on. So in Spain, we're looking at the public sector and how the public sector are dealing with their clients. In Austria, we're looking at large heat pump installations and how it is possible for us to help to promote those kind of projects, and to get the consultants and the clients that are interested in deploying heat pumps to actually to do this. So I'm just looking here now. Dan, do I have some slides now that I can show?
Yes, they are showing, but you cannot change them. So my colleague can change them. Sorry again for the mishap. Technical issues.
Yeah, no problem.
The little gremlins in the computers. So
yeah. Okay. So if we can go to the next slide. So really, just in that little bit of rambling speech that I just made there, and I apologize for the nature of it. The issue, or the main issue that the Heat Pump for All project seeks to address is to look at the skills that are required, and to, in the different markets to intervene appropriately. So, or at least not to be so arrogant as to say that we're going to intervene, but to try to identify and to try and to bring forward good solutions. So, it's really critical that heat pump installations are optimized, that they get the best chance possible to work at the efficiencies that are set out in the test bed situations, where you have an SPF, a seasonal performance factor, in the region of between 3 and 4 for an air to water heat pump. We're addressing the market in Spain and in Ireland and in Austria, so we have different kind of delivery mechanisms. So that's important to bear in mind. If we could skip on, is it possible for? Yeah, thank you. So we're obviously in the situation where heat pump sales have really exponentially increased over the last few years. And if we can skip on really quickly through these slides to the next one, please. The objective of the Heat Pump for All project is to look at the competency framework for skills, to really to kind of, I suppose, provide end users with the knowledge that they can go to the marketplace and demand the required skills. I think that's the key point, that we create the awareness at end user level. So whether they are domestic homeowners or larger building users, that they know the kind of skills that they need to be demanding from the marketplace. And then once we have that in place, that we can use that to increase the number of skilled workers. And part of this project then is to reach out into other regions within the EU to replicate this kind of these learnings. So if we could skip on to the next one, please. We have very definite impacts identified and how we will measure that is by the way we can reach out to designers, installers, end users, and to increase their knowledge, increase their awareness, and through that process, which is really taking place this year in the summer of 2022, that we would end up with these kind of savings. So 2 gigawatt hours per year of primary energy savings and so forth, like the numbers that you can see there in front of you. So the next slide, please. So again, a Horizon 2020 project. We have the obvious, the work packages there for project management, etc. But the key one here is the skills competency, and that's what Dan's event today is all about. It's about developing that. Work package 5 there is a pilot, which is really the core of the whole project, which is taking place as we speak, you know, from April, May, June, July, up to September of this year in the 3 pilot regions of Ireland, Austria, and Spain. So next slide, please. The partners are, as we say here, the European Heat Pump Association, and we have the partners in the various different countries. So we can skip on past that one, please. So the key thing here is that we review the best practice initiatives that are already in place. So it's clear to say that in different countries we are at different levels of development. And in Ireland, for example, we've last year published a national standard for the design and installation and commissioning of heat pumps in residential buildings. So that's a new development for Ireland, and it builds upon, if we go back to the building regulations, it builds upon the progress that has been made over the last number of years in bringing the Part L, which is the energy efficiency part of the building regulations, to a kind of a much more modern, much more energy efficient level. And the heat pump standard is feeding directly into that. In Austria, we have probably got they're further down the road, and that's in that sense that they've got academies of installers and so forth. And maybe in Spain we're a little bit behind the curve, so it's a bit catching up on that, while they have lots of air conditioning experience. So it's about the balance of all of those different issues, and policy and legislation is all feeding into that. So the next slide, please. Training is really, I suppose we're taking the approach in this project that we are going in at the pilot level and dealing with actual installations with actual, local authorities, groups of houses, actual projects, and seeing what training is needed, and bringing in installers, bringing in manufacturers, and really trying to get to kind of help them with real projects on the ground. And that's how we're building up the knowledge within this Heat Pump for All project, and that will all feed back in then into our knowledge hub, which will be a resource that will be available on our website. Next slide, please. So as I say, we're dealing very definitely with manufacturers and suppliers on the one hand, and then with building owners. So it's a case of bringing projects to really real life projects, getting installations with the expertise really resides within the manufacturers, and it's to try and get that expertise out into the marketplace. That's what we're trying to do here. Next one, please. And we as part of this project, we have some benchmarking tools that will be available for the 3 pilot regions, and then the knowledge hub, which will be the repository for the information that comes from the interactions between manufacturers and actual sites and pilot sites. So really, I think that's what I have to say. I think we can conclude my presentation here. It's been challenging in the sense that for the Heat Pump for All project, we still haven't met as a project team. We are meeting in Brussels in a few weeks' time, so that's going to be the first time that we've met. But we're bringing experience from our different countries to the table. And I think that will be a benefit, that we can really kind of bring real life situations out give them a good opportunity to be aired, and hopefully this can come back then and help with European policy, etc. So that's my presentation, Dan. I'd like to give it back to you now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Porek. And it's a pleasure having you in Brussels in a few weeks' time.
Yeah.
It's true, I haven't realized, right? So since the project has started, we haven't really met because, well, everyone knows there were some circumstances that prevented people traveling. Just one or two questions, if I may. One is from fellow panelist Julie. She says, what is the profile of workers you are targeting for heat pump installation? Young students, trained craftsmen, plumbers, electricians, or something else? People from completely different backgrounds.
Yeah, I think the first thing to say is that we have 3 pilot regions, and they are all going to be, you know, they have to deal with the realities of their region, so they're all different. So I can speak about the Irish situation, and you know, we would love to have the situation where there's a heat pump course where plumbers are required to carry out specific training for heat pumps, but that's not the case, you know. So we have an add-on module, which is, you know, only required if a heat pump is being installed under the situation that it's being grant funded. So to answer Julie's question, who are we targeting? We are targeting the people who are in the industry already. So they may be plumbers, generally speaking, they are plumbers. They are coming, they are, how will I say, they are involved in heat pump installations, but maybe not really by vocation, that they are kind of finding themselves in the situation. And so we are bringing those people to the learning table, let's say, and say, these are the kind of things that we need you to think about. That because manufacturers and the commercial reality of getting a heat pump into a building is driven by the sale process primarily, and that's not okay from a technical point of view, you know. And that's the issue that we're trying to deal with. That it's been driven by the lowest cost, and this means that the best design is not always the one that ends up being installed. And this is the conundrum that we're trying to deal with, you know.
And then another question about the building owners. Do you have any suggestions for a key mechanism that would help building owners better understand the operation of their heat pump system? This would be quite interesting because, well, the more they understand, I think the more they get fascinated by the device,
yeah,
and
absolutely.
the more they become advocates of it, and they want to show their friends and acquaintances. So it's like a way of not only disseminating it, but spreading the technology. So any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think the ability to understand the energy consumption of the heat pump is critical to that, you know, so that so at the very least that they have a separate electricity meter, or there's an inbuilt on most heat pumps, modern heat pumps now, that there is a way of counting the electrical consumption of the heat pump. And I think if the absence of that really makes it very difficult for people to come to terms with what's happening. So that's step number one, is to understand the energy consumption of the heat pump and where they can adjust that and fine tune that, but be part of that and be aware of it, be you know, watching it and say, well, in the month of February, it was a lot higher than the month of March, or, you know, And that's the kind of understanding that's needed. I think that that it will taper off down into the summer months, that there's going to be very little consumption. And, maybe in Ireland, we're looking at people who are used to a tank of oil, kerosene, and that they would fill their kerosene tank once a year. It's to get that level of understanding, as to what you put in is what you get out kind of idea, so that the installer can give that message across to the homeowner so that they understand that. I think that would be really important. Exactly.
So the installer is the ambassador of the technology. They're they represent it. A bad job would be very bad for the technology itself, but it wouldn't be the technology's fault. On the other hand, a very nice installer would really be a major advantage, right? Someone you can talk to, someone that can guide you through the process, that can help you through the process of maintaining it. So you become very proud of the technology, you understand it, you can show it around. And
I think, Dan, as well, that there is a danger that during the construction project, let's say a new house is being built or a house is being renovated, and that's generally when the heat pump is being installed, that a whole 12-month period maybe elapses before there's any interaction between the homeowner and the installer. And that's a real risk, because they've missed the opportunity to monitor the situation. And it's kind of convenient maybe for the installer to not engage with the homeowner, because they move on to the next job because they're busy and they don't have time to go back and say, well, hello there, Mrs. Stefanica, how many kilowatt hours have you used this week? They don't have time, so it's this kind of making sure that you continue on an interaction with the homeowner and monitor the situation. I think that's really important.
Indeed. So a major aspect that we've also identified in the competency framework, the need for the installer to be an ambassador, to be business savvy as well, because of course the way that they liaise with the customers really helps their business. So they get recurrent customers, but also the customers are very happy, so they recommend the installer and they recommend the technologies further. So an installer is just not, their competencies are not just limited towards installing the heat pump and that's it. They are or at least should be so much more in this. And I'm again, it's really a pleasure to participate in this project, so we can take a look at all the sides needed, especially now, as Luca was saying, that the need for installing heat pumps and the need for replacing fossil fuel technologies is becoming very, very acute. So thank you so much, Porek. If you have any more questions for Porek, please put them in the chat. I see you have already put a few. So Porek, if you could take a look at the chat and see if you can answer. And again, thank you so much. Always a pleasure having you. And again, sorry about the presentation. We got it shared at the end. But you need a little bit of stress in life, so that's okay.
Thanks, Doug.
You are very welcome, and thank you again for joining and for the very relevant insights. So I will ask one of my colleagues, because now we actually have more that are handling the presentation, to change the slide, please, to the next one. And I will introduce the panel discussions. So basically, we have 4 panelists. Each of them will have a short presentation. And the order is Julie, Jean, Carlos, and Thomas. Each of them will go through their presentations. If a question comes to your mind during the presentation, again, please put it in the chat. Make sure to identify to whom the question is. That would make answering it a bit easier. And then, of course, after the presentations are over, we can have a bit of a discussion on what was said, what the panelists' opinions are about the competencies needed, what their organizations are doing in this field, and of course, answering the questions that are coming from you. So with that being said, and if I could get the next slide, please. I would really like to welcome Julie Buffy. She's the Secretary General of Europe ON, the European Electrical Contractors Association. Founded in 1954, Europe ON is the voice of the professionals who switch Europe on by operating electrical systems in buildings and infrastructures, including rooftop solar panels, energy management systems, and electric vehicles charging points. Julie is also in charge of the Skills for Climate campaign, raising awareness on the shortages in skilled professionals, an issue that will considerably weigh on Europe's ability to deliver the energy transition. Originally from France, Julie studied public administration at Sciences Po Paris and European Affairs at King's College London. And her quote is, "No matter how high our ambitions are in the energy transition, if we cannot find skilled professionals in sufficient numbers to implement this change, this is both a tremendous opportunity and a potential obstacle for Europe to lead the way." Of course. So that's the major problem that we've identified, right? So the manufacturing of heat pumps, for example, can be steadily or rapidly stepped up, but the need for very trained installers, as well as all the competencies that we just touched upon, is something that needs to be tackled as well. And of course, something that needs to be tackled sooner rather than later. So Julie, the floor is yours. Just tell us and we will change the slides for you just in case that the little gremlins in the computers show up again.
All good, thanks. Can you just confirm that you can hear me and that you can see me?
I confirm that we can hear you and that we can see you.
Lovely. I can't see myself. That's a mystery, but that's fine. I've seen enough of me anyway. Okay. Well, thank you very much. First to you all. Thank you, Thomas and Dan, for inviting me, and a very good morning to everybody. So then I suggest that we go to the first slide, which will probably be just the introduction slide.
Yes, so I think my colleague's mouse is...
Julie, you should be able to share the screen for your...
Oh, okay. I thought
let me know if it's not or...
Oh, no, please don't share the screen, Elena. Just change the slides when Julie...
Oh, I mean, I can, up to you.
No, it's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you so much.
So I'll let you do that. Okay, so my presentation today will be about the campaign that Europe ON is running, which is called Skills for Climate. And we are looking at solving the skills and professionals shortages in the energy transition. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So maybe just a few words of introduction, because you might not be familiar with Europe ON, that's all right. Europe ON is the European Association of Electrical Contractors. So the most well-known profession around this in this category would be electricians. We were founded in 1954, and we represent a big sector across Europe. That's around 300,000 businesses, mainly very local, small and medium enterprises, almost 2 million professionals with an annual turnover of 200 billion euros. Our members are all national associations of electrical contractors. You have the logos on the site, maybe you know some of them in your country. And I'm the General Secretary of this organization. Maybe before starting, really, I would like to make something very clear, which is that although it differs from one country to the next, electrical contractors don't do as much heat pump installation as HVAC installers. For example, Patrick was mentioning plumbers, obviously. So that's still a bit new to us. That's also why I will talk from a wider perspective on skills and workforce shortages. However, I think that it's really relevant to be with you today because markets are evolving, and with the acceleration of electrification, there is an increasing need for electrician skills in the heat pump market. If we can go to the next slide, please. So a bit of context. The Skills for Climate campaign was launched in November 2019 because all across Europe, our members, electrical contractors, report increasing difficulties in finding the right people for the numerous missions that they have to tackle, because basically they have to implement the energy transition on the electricity side. In Germany alone, we are currently missing 80,000 people in the electrical contracting sector. 80,000 people is roughly 1/5 of this precise trade. And as we've seen in the previous presentations, the heat pump market is rising. The renewable technology markets altogether are rising. So this problem is set to worsen if we don't act. And when we launched the Skills for Climate campaign, that was in 2019. So clearly that was very much aligned with the release of the Green Deal, which will involve more electrification, more deployment of renewables, more energy efficiency. So that's why we wanted to be part of the debate and to make sure that this crucial topic would be taken into account. Because what we are facing is a dual problem. If we can go to the next slide. That's first a technical challenge. That's, I think, what Patrick has been mentioning a lot. You know, how do we find the right skills? Technologies are always evolving, so we always need to upskill even further. And then there's a workforce challenge, because it's great to have the best training skills, the up-to-date facilities, etc. But if you have no one going to those trainings, then nothing will happen in practice. And that's the major aspect that I really want to highlight today: the lack of applicants, the lack of people in the trade, sorry, and a workforce which is aging. Next slide, please. So the overarching asks that we are putting forward in this campaign since 2019 are the following. The first is to intertwine skills and climate strategies, because we felt that at the beginning of the Green Deal and before it was presented, climate strategies were overlooking to a large extent the issue of jobs and skills to concretely implement the energy transition on the ground. I think that we've gone a long way since 2019. We hear a lot more about skills and jobs than what do we do in practice. That's another topic, and I'll come back to that. But I think that this rationale is really being heard more and more. So that's a first achievement. And then we are obviously asking for incentives for technical education, which is too often seen as a last resort option in education. Incentives for apprenticeships, for upskilling, reskilling, and we are also in favor of more public-private partnerships, because we need students who are trained to fit with the markets and business opportunities of nowadays. Next slide, please. There's something that I would like to make very clear, because when we talk about skills and the lack of attractiveness of the sector, etc., people usually come to me and tell me, well, that's your problem. I mean, if you don't have enough people in the electrical contracting sector, then do something. So I would like to make very clear that we do something, and I would like to present some of our members' commitments and actions. But I think that it's really important to understand that solving the skills and workers shortages is not just on our hands, because it's a way wider problem. For example, it's not just about the electrician trade. There are really similar issues in the plumbing trade and in all the construction sector trades, and actually in all the craftsmanship trades. So that's way bigger than us. And also, this is not the problem of one country that would be ill-equipped, because this is really shared across all countries in Europe. This is a topic that we at Europon discuss in all our meetings. And we just met a few weeks ago with our US counterparts, and the same problem is faced in the US. So I think that this is a structural issue, which is bigger than us. And this is why we need policymakers and all stakeholders to be involved. That's a challenge because it calls on reforming education, reforming labor market structures, and also change the way that we look at education, and especially technical education. So in short, it's a change of mindset, and it doesn't happen overnight. So there's a lot of work ahead of us, especially because it takes time. An electrician apprentice will go to school for and in apprenticeship for 3 years at least. And so I'd like just to present a few actions, recent actions that have been put forward by our members. So these are 2 examples from Germany. Germany just, so our member actually just started a new apprenticeship, which is called the Building Integrator Apprenticeship. Please don't ask me to say that in German. And basically the idea is for new students to be trained in integrating all technologies together in the building. So that includes heat pumps, solar panels, an EV charging point, packs, all electrical installations actually. And we hope that it can really be a model for many countries to have a really high quality standard of skills for the building of the future. Next slide, please. Also, just another example from France, if we can see it. Okay, but I can just talk about that. So in France, our members have put forward a website which presents all types of jobs in the electricity sector with first-hand testimonials, because we feel that the need for role models is extremely important to attract the younger generation into jobs which are often looked as old-fashioned, hard, etc. Then, I don't know if the slides are following me, because for me it's all freezed, but yeah, so that was the French, and yeah, then let's go to the next one. So that's a very recent campaign that was launched by our Finnish members. It's about the invisible power of electricity, and trying to show on social media, on very various medias, how appealing the electricity sector should be to younger generations. There are 4 faces in this campaign, all people working in the electricity sector for real, to men, to women, again, trying to emphasize role models. And this initiative was not just taken by the electrical contractors of Finland. This was done in cooperation with a big competence center and the Wholesalers Association. They have very high targets for 2030. They want first to double the number of candidates in electrotech careers. And second, which is extremely ambitious, even for Finland, they want to raise the share of female candidates to 50%. Next slide, please. And that's an initiative from the Netherlands, which is called a campaign which is called Tomorrow's Makers. I don't want to go too much into details. I just wanted to mention it because Jan, who will be the next presenter, is working a lot with Techniek Netherlands. As you see, we are trying to have very widespread campaigns. This poster is on the motorway in the Netherlands. Next slide is just to mention, world skills, Euro skills, lots of skills competitions in which our trade is taking part. And again, that's a great way to increase awareness, attractiveness, and present role models. I'd like to turn to the next slide, just to mention now that I've mentioned the members, I just would like to come back to the campaign and also to the commitments that Europon as a whole is taking. So obviously, we decided to join in 2020 the European Pact for Skills initiative, which was launched by Commissioners Schmid and Breton. And we also set up our very own skills and attractiveness working group, where we are discussing between ourselves to get the best ideas from each country and try to move forward. So, for example, our very first roundtable was about debunking the negative cliches about the jobs in the electrical sector and trying to emphasize positive ideas and turn all those negative ideas into assets. Next slide, please. So now I'd like to really come back to the Skills Reclame campaign and where we are now in 2022. Obviously, I don't want to go too much into details, but there are lots of rationales for action in light of the recovery plans post-COVID. the Fit for 55 package and now the energy crisis. There are so many jobs to create, but conversely, if we do nothing, those jobs will never be created and the climate and energy targets will never be reached because we will just lack hands to implement these changes on the ground. So this is why we wrote to the Commission, European Commission, in March 2022. If we can go to the next slide, please. With a letter that was encompassing all of those issues. And we reached a record high number of supporting associations showing the pressing urgency of this issue nowadays. So obviously EHP was a firm supporter of ours. I must say that EHP has actually been supporting us from the very beginning of this campaign since 2019. We are working often on this issue together. And I'd like to conclude with the 3 key asks that we are pushing forward in this letter that we are working on at the moment with the EU. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So the first thing is that we feel that there's been a lot of focus in recent years on skills gaps, skills mismatches. Certainly it's not enough and more needs to be done, but something has been forgotten, and I came to that a bit before. It's the lack of workers, the lack of candidates. And I think that actually our Skills for Climate campaign, it's a nice name, and maybe it should be Skills and Workers for Climate campaign. Well, that would be a very long hashtag, but you get the idea. And so the first thing that we ask to the EU is to ensure that member states assess the gap between available and needed installation professionals to roll out the energy transition. So that's a very technical proposition, just making a report. But we believe that first, it's something that the Commission can really ask to member states. And that would be a way to confront member states with the pressing discrepancy in available personnel, because and we think that it will encourage them to take action. I told you that in Germany, there are currently 80,000 vacancies. In France, it's around 20,000. We have those figures, but we don't have them for all countries. And most importantly, we need member states to do this work and to react and take action and raise awareness. And I think that's really important for governments. Well, it should be really important to governments, because let's say that in the whole installation sector, so not just looking at electricians, but plumbers, roofers, etc. If, let's say, Germany makes this report and realizes that 500,000 people are missing to roll out the energy transition in the next 5 years, then there's a very clear incentive to create those jobs. It's a really important policy for the government, but there's also a clear incentive to act, because if you do nothing, you are pretty sure that climate and energy targets will not be reached. We see that the Commission is starting to be quite receptive to this issue of assessing the gap of workers. We've seen some promising proposals in the new Energy Performance of Buildings Directive. And we are also seeing on the Parliament side interesting amendments in the Renewable Energy Directive and the Energy Efficiency Directive. Well, it's still under negotiation, but we see that things are starting to move, and we hope that it will be for the best. Next slide, please. Then the EU is always looking at opportunities to communicate widely. And so we think that it would be very relevant for the EU to launch an ambitious campaign to enhance the attractiveness of technical vocational education and careers in the twin transitions. We have a need to change mindsets, because I don't know if you remember when you were a student, but I do remember that when I was at school and that I was not performing well, my teachers would threaten me to go to technical education, and that seemed like a nightmare. And that's a problem. That's a problem that we always see technical education as a last resort option, as something for the dumb, because there are lots of skills there. There are lots of great projects there. It's purposeful. We are talking about mitigating climate change. We are talking about making a change in people's buildings and lives. And it's never just that way. So we really need to change mindsets, and that's so relevant with the Green Deal objectives. So we hope that the EU would be eager to do that. That would also be a good way to attract new diverse profiles, because women are missing here. And so we definitely need to look at all candidates. And of course, that could be a starting point for member states to act and to maybe do their very own national bespoke campaigns. Next slide, please. That will be my very last one. So yeah, the last point that we made in this letter is to ask the EU to gather member states, social partners, academia, and really all relevant EU and national stakeholders in a platform where they could exchange best practices. We've seen some very interesting results in the Just Transition platform. So we are calling for something similar to promote technical education and make sure that skills and workforce shortages in the energy transition are a top priority. And that would obviously be a good way to connect this challenge to ongoing EU initiatives, because there are lots of great initiatives, but they need more coordination if we want to make a clear difference. So that's all for me. I hope that I haven't been too long, and thank you very much. I'm really eager to listen to the other presentations.
Thank you so much, Julie. If you could put in the chat the link that you had there to the letter. And also very, very interesting, putting together all the programs that are somewhat dispersed, right? With Erasmus, with the different training opportunities that member countries are offering. So very, very interesting. And Julie will put the link in the chat so you can access the letter. And always a pleasure to support you in such a nice initiative. If you have any questions for Julie, put them in the chat now, or wait until the panel discussion and put them then as you wish. Of course, again, just identify which speaker you're aiming the question towards. So Elena, if you could change to the next slide, please. It's my pleasure to introduce you to Jan Kromwijk, Program Manager of EU projects with 18 years of experience as an educational technologist working for ISSO. Coordinating, writing, and editing of teaching materials for initial and post-initial education, coaching on didactics of experts, writing teaching materials and/or qualification schemes, creating learning networks focused on craftsmanship in the building sector, developing e-learning interactions on building errors, educational design of the Build Up Skills Advisor app, developing qualification schemes, and much, much more. It's a pleasure to have Jan here today. And also, I have to say, I really like your slides, Jan. The graphic designer did a top-notch job. You have to recommend him or her to us as well. The virtual floor is yours. Please tell my colleague when she needs to change the slides. Please.
Thank you, Dan, for both the invitation and the introduction, and thanks a lot for your participation in this meeting. I would like to present you in a few slides our experience from the Netherlands with task-based unit of learning outcomes, closely related to developing a comprehensive framework for skills and competences. Next slide, please. Yeah, why do you need task-based learning outcomes? In the first place, within the Horizon 2020 Bus League project, we need them to stimulate demand, and when the demand is stimulated, to fill in the stimulated demand. And you can see at the top, the recognition of energy skills can lead to legislation changes, can lead to stimulate the demand. And on the other hand, if you have a good recognition of energy skills or of heat pump skills, then you can provide practical and effective upskilling, because you exactly know what you can train and what you need to train in order to fill in the stimulated demand. And especially in the time of labor shortages, it's very important that you can upskill people task-based so that they can start working as fast as possible and join the market capacity. Next slide, please. Why do you need task-based learning outcomes? Especially for fast upskilling. For example, in the Netherlands, we have quite a huge demand now for hybrid heat pump installations. So the traditional CV installer needs to be able to answer questions from customers on their installations and also on the hybrid component. Next slide, please. It's also highly needed for cross-craft issues, especially when you are going to install a heat pump. Many components of the building and the installation need to be in proper shape and fit for purpose. And if it is not fit for purpose, the workforce needs to be able to recognize, for example, the air leakages and the questions that the customer have, and using the proper tooling to address those cross-crafting issues. Next one. And last but not least, also for easy procurement. If the market is not asking for properly skilled persons, then the market is not getting properly skilled persons, or they have a chance not to get properly skilled persons. So the more clear you are at the start of a project that you need properly skilled persons and that you can make explicit what you understand with properly skills, then you can ask for the right person to be able to do a good job. And not only to deliver quality, but we see in the Netherlands that when you are working with skills craftsmen, that also the time of installation can be shortened quite heavily. So it's not only about quality, it's also about effectivity of the work. Next slide. And then I think it's the last one, the why on task-based learning outcomes, to enable micro-learning. We are aware that learning and the field of learning is changing rapidly, especially by introduction of the smartphone. You can really learn anytime, any place, anywhere. So you can use the task-based learning outcomes to deliver small learning units or small quality checks or small other forms of didactical content in order to get people trained properly. Next slide. And for example, in this store where you can scan the QR code as a craftsman, you directly get a few questions on the things you are seeing in order to upskill not only on site, but even in the store itself. Next slide. Yes. Then I go a little bit more in depth on the why task-based or unit of learning outcomes are needed from the technical perspective. Unit of learning outcomes are statements regarding what the learner knows, understands, and is able to do, a very important one, including responsibility. On completion of a learning process, and they are defined in terms of knowledge, skills, and responsibility. And most times, the responsibility is translated into the competence element. What they give a practical perspective on the required skills in the value chain. They led to increased recognition of the skills that are learned. And what we found especially helping is clear learning outcomes for development of training materials, so that all the market actors that are providing, for example, heat pump trainings, know what are the minimum requirements for their training, because that greatly helps them to steer their experts to proper design of training materials. And it is also flexible for future improvements, such as alternative refrigerants or new type of heat pump installations popping up all the time. Next slide, please. How do they work? how does it look like? You are looking at the screen of our unit of learning outcomes database, and I have promised Dan to took out some examples from the Dutch competencies on heat pumps. And one of the actions a craftsman need to be able to is to give some advice about heat pump installations. And what we do is that we divide that main task into subtasks. For example, advice on the technical aspects, identify points for attention and risks from the cross-craft element, and also advise solutions around the heat pump system. Next slide. Those are worked out in separate unit of learning outcomes. So the subtask advice on technical aspects has two harmonized unit of learning outcomes. And what does harmonized mean? Each unit of learning outcome is one time in the database. So if you can apply the same unit of learning outcome for another technology or for another part of the work, then the same unit of learning outcome can be assigned, also making it possible to create your own track record of unit of learning outcomes you are able to work skilled on. And the other unit of learning outcome is identify the main components of the heat pump. That's a generic one. What we are also doing, and that's currently in process, that we link the task to the relevant professions, because not everybody is able to do an advice to the customer, especially on the technical aspects. And what we do is that we can also link it to different specialisms and technology to make it possible to serve out the unit of learning outcomes and the related learning elements to the professions that need those learning outcomes. Next slide. And what is then the competence? The competence is described in a responsibility in order to what is the expected performance of the subtask. Then we are describing a set of skills, and it can be one or more. So you always have one competence in the unit of learning outcomes. In order to be competent, you can have multiple skills, in this case, one. And you can also have multiple knowledge elements you need in order to use your skills to identify the main components. Next slide. And how do they work with regards to mutual recognition? You can see here the screenshot is a little bit smaller because I had to paste two into one. This subtask, identify points for attention and risk, is used in two tasks. So that means that if you are trained on this subtask, you are fit for purpose in addressing two other tasks that are related. And you can see it also in the unit of learning outcomes. You can see that the competence description to identify points for attention and risks is linked to three different subtasks. So if you are trained on this competence, then you have a package of three subtasks addressed, making modular upskilling and very flexible upskilling possible. Next one, please. And to give you a more detailed overview, what do you get as a result? You get an overview of the tasks, including all the subtasks, for the full value chain and for the full process. So from the start, the intake at the client, until the end, the removal of the installation and the replacement of the installation. Behind each of the subtasks, you see the links to the unit of learning outcomes, and then you can also see, for example, that unit of learning outcome 6 is used multiple times in different subtasks. Next slide. Then an overview of the unit of learning outcomes. Every unit of learning outcome has a unique ID, so it is only occurring once in the database. There is one competence description. The set of skills is split by commas to make them clearly distincted from each other. And that's the same for the knowledge items. Next slide. And how can you take them in use? What you can do if you want to recognize, for example, a heat pump installer on the advice of a customer, then you can select the tasks and the subtasks and the unit of learning outcomes you want to be part of the training curriculum. And you can publish them in a so-called qualification scheme that can be linked to a certain profession or a profession group. And based on that, you can issue recognitions. Next slide. Yes. For example, in the Build of Skills Advisor app, the unit of learning outcomes, power, serving out the right learning content to the right craftsmen and professionals that need that content. And you can also see that it links to, for example, e-learning that is available for the profession. Next one. And this is in 3, so yeah, thanks a lot. They power personal recognition. You can find your skills. You can also find your skills cards that are linked to the published recognitions, and they can even be verified. We have proven that principle in the Horizon 2020 Newcom project. By scanning the QR code, you can find out that I'm a recognized professional. Thanks a lot for your attention. I think this is the last slide. And I am asking you all, we need to get heat pumps on the move. And as Build Up Skills teams and projects, we are working on making the installers able to speed up and address the many needs of the customers. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Jan. I was just taking a screenshot of that because not only do I like the graphics, but I really like the message. Thanks so much. As usual, very, very relevant and very, very insightful. Always a fan of the Bus League project. If you could put maybe a link in the chat so that participants have it, I don't know, bookmarked on their browser. Again, a lot of work being done as part of that project. And I think Jan has had and has a lot of projects that he's working on that link to it. So thank you so much. And Elena, could you change to the next slide, please? Thank you so much. So it's my pleasure to introduce you to Carlos Garcia, who is since 2015 head of building and construction sector within CTA, Andalusia Technological Corporation, the most important innovation-oriented cross-sectoral public-private partnership in Spain, with more than 700 businesses-led RTDI projects financed since its inception back in 2005. Specialized in business development and technology commercialization and internationalization within the energy, environment, and construction domains. He has got more than 35 years of experience as an R&D manager, both in the private and in the public sector at the national and international level, 14 of them in CDTI, the Spanish National RTDI Funding Agency. As always, it's a pleasure to have you, Carlos. And the virtual camera and microphone is yours. Please just tell my colleague when to change the slides and we will do it for you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dan. I will try to provide you with an insight into the regional or one of the regional dimensions of our project, in this case referring to southern Spain, which I think reflects many commonalities with other southern regions in Europe. I will try to highlight the achievements and also the barriers we are facing and prospects for the near future. Next slide, please. First of all, it is important to have in mind that in the case of Spain, there are broadly 3 different climatic regions, which entail, of course, different energy supply needs. In the case of heat pumps installations, I must tell you that nearly 90% are located in the Mediterranean climatic region, which is the lowest one, and most of them onto the coastline. In many cases, nearly all devoted to cooling purposes, or at the most being reversible or multipurpose equipments. So in this sense, both residential and cooling orientations for these equipments prevail, and at the same time, there is a clear opportunity in some other regions which this technology is in its very early stages of inception. Next slide, please. In the case of Spain, and particularly in Andalusia, there is a clear untapped potential for sanitary hot water applications, and also geothermal systems, as shown by the graphic, wherein it's clearly shown this differentiation, or this gap in comparison to other EU countries, in particular France. Next slide, please. Which kind of measures have been put in place to promote heat pumps and heat pumps applications? First of all, it has to be mentioned the huge effort paid by the Spanish Association of Heat Pump Manufacturers. They have developed a very good website just 4 or 5 years from now, including a lot of information, dossiers, brochures, also a very good technical guide of an intermediate level, I would say. Heat pump fundamentals, procedures, and practical and case studies, together with an active involvement in social networks, info days, and so forth. Next slide, please. There is also an important initiative being currently carried out by the Spanish Institute for Qualification, with a view to further improve the uptake of energy efficiency related competencies in order to better draw up energy efficiency and REST inclusion installation for lower to medium degree professionals. In this case, there are 2 entryways. On the one hand, the let's say cross-cutting installation and maintenance profiles, with specific mentions to heating, cooling, and climatization, with a number of level 2 and level 3 qualification already put in place, both related to assembly and maintenance, including piping, and design, supervision, and control. Lately, within the water and energy competence domain, there have been some updates and improvements relating to energy efficiency qualifications and competencies, but so far no level 2 nor level 3 qualifications for heat pump based aerothermal or geothermal systems have been developed. Only overall energy efficiency in buildings qualifications. Next slide, please. From the narrow construction sector point of view, some important initiatives have been also rolled out in the last 2 years, particularly the activities carried out by the regional sustainable construction cluster, with a good number of education and training initiatives, albeit focused on passive measure standards and certifications. They are currently focused on design aspects, not exactly installing requirements. And in this sense, we are trying to get some kind of agreements with this association in order to include in its education and training package these measures related also to installer profiles. Next slide, please. There is also an important stakeholder at the regional level, which is the Regional Energy Agency, which is playing a paramount role in 2 main aspects. On the one hand, deploying specific incentives for renewable energy system acquisition, modernization, of course, including heat pumps, and also adopting a centralized role to foster the development of emerging technologies and practices. In this sense, they have been driving in the last 2 years a centrally managed network of public buildings for energy efficiency best practices dissemination, centralized energy planning and programming, unified energy services provision, energy rehabilitation measure, both active and passive, including in this case the installation of heat pumps, and also, and to my mind, the most important initiatives from their side, heat pump pilots and flagship projects in public buildings, both residential and also tertiary, as in the case for instance of hospitals. They have also publicized a good number of case studies, brochures, leaflets, and so forth. So in this sense, the role played at regional level by the regional energy agencies is of capital importance. Next slide, please. With this overall picture, I would like to share with you some preliminary conclusions and the way forward. The first case would be that a great deal of dissemination and communication effort has been made so far, both by manufacturers and utilities. They have carried out a number of events. They have prepared lots of papers, brochures, leaflets. They have intervened in social media, but they haven't always addressed the whole set of audiences. In many cases, they have addressed high-level professional audiences, but not less familiarized or less technology competent audiences. And in this sense, there is clearly room for improvement. There is also there are also energy efficiency in building lifelong and dual vet training modules available, but not specific on heat pumps. Some specific sections deal broadly with this issue, but not sufficiently in depth. In the case of the narrow construction subsector, there is little familiarization with these technologies, and in the domain of installers, there is, of course, awareness of this emerging technology, but and also there is a confidence, but not a clear perception of the upskilling needs. So there is in this case again a clear need for further education and training measures. The qualification framework is more responsive to emerging technologies, but heat pumps are not sufficiently given a proper visibility. And again, this is a matter for discussion and for improvement. And last but not least, education and training funding is clearly a bottleneck. Although there are different programs related to vet and lifelong training, there is currently a lack of specific education and training funding related to heat pump capabilities and enabling services. Next slide, please. It is also important to bear in mind how in this region the education and training cycle is currently conceived and deployed. One of the main drawbacks is the lengthy course registration, homologation, and certification procedure, which in the end hampered the correct deployment of these learning tools. We have also to fight against, and this is a task we are deeply involved in our project and in this pilot region, the lack of training culture within the sector, both firms and workers. There is also a clearly perceived firm reluctance to adopt in-house workday training for employees because it is perceived as a waste of time or a conflict with the daily duties. And in this case, also this reinforced message on the medium or even short-term advantages of this education and training measures is needed. Another transmitted gap from the staff involved in this education and training is the insufficient tailored multimedia tools and tuitional content. It could act as an enabler or as an alternative for in-house training, and in this sense could be a very good alternative or even a complement to these more traditional learning tools. And in this case, again, there is a clear lack of these kind of products. We are also trying to promote in the marketplace. So far, there has been a lack of demand for sustainable construction, both in the promoter and the constructors domain, although some changes are in progress. As I have mentioned, the creation and inception of the regional sustainable construction platform is a clear milestone in this sense. As I have also been referring to in my previous slides, there is a rigid normative system and competence dispersion in sustainable construction, which in this case makes it more difficult to introduce appropriate energy efficiency in buildings, and more specifically heat pump related contents in the educational packages. And last but not least, the overall lack of confidence in the lower end of the value chain on the expected performance, because although there is a clear perception of the potential benefits, there is a lack of demonstration of success stories which would permit to gain confidence of the expected performance and cost-benefit ratio of these technologies. Next slide, please. In this pilot region of Andalusia, the next steps are on the one hand, build further on the current role of the administration, both on the financial, legal, and aspects, and its role as early adopters and prescribers. We think that in this case it is crucial reinforcing this profile with a view to facilitate the adoption of these technologies region-wide, to foster the dialogue between vocational education and training organizations, educators and trainings, and social providers. In the coming weeks, we are going to celebrate a number of seminars and B2B sessions with these organizations to facilitate this common approach. And finally, to involve consumer organizations and social media stakeholders. That's all from my side, if I'm not mistaken. Thank you so much, Dan. I'll give you back control to you. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Carlos. So it's my pleasure to introduce you the last speaker, our very own Thomas Novak, Secretary General of the European Heat Pump Association. Thomas is a long-term renewable energy aficionado. Apart from closely following the energy transition both in the electricity and heating sectors, he is the owner of a heat pump, a PV power plant, and a building in which both cooperate peacefully. Now, to my private knowledge, he is also the renter of an EV car that uses a heat pump. So he has all the bases covered. In his professional life, Thomas represents the European Heat Pump Association as Secretary General in Brussels. His main responsibilities are the representation of the industry at the European institutions, networking with other stakeholders in the field of heating and cooling, as well as the management of the association and its future development, and of course, dealing with policymakers, project developers, and large, medium, and small companies, as well as startups. So, Thomas, the virtual floor is yours. And Elena, would you please change it to the next slide?
Thank you very much, Dan. In the sense of time, I only prepared one slide. From our perspective, from the Heat Pump Association's perspective, we are working against the backdrop of a Repower EU project, against the backdrop of a Green Deal, and against the backdrop of Fit for 55. And to all of these targets, heat pumps are contributing to. We are currently counting about 100,000 full-time equivalents in Europe. We don't know exactly how many this is, but this would include manufacturing and installation. And if we look at Repower EU, then we can see that the Commission alone aims at doubling sales by 2025, and another 5 times, or compared to today, multiplying it by a factor of 5 by 2029. In order to achieve 10 million additional hydronic heat pumps, of course, that means many additional more millions of air-to-air heat pumps on top of it, and additional 30 million heat pumps, hydronic heat pumps by 2030. And again, this will add another 25 to 30 million coming from air-to-air, because that's about half at the moment. Today, we are looking at 2.1 million heat pumps sold. Some of them are hot water units, the rest is used for heating. And there is a split that is very dominated from air-to-air units as we speak. What we can say when people say, do you have enough installers, that at the moment it's quite tight. So if you try to buy a heat pump in pretty much every country in Europe, not least triggered by the recent discussion, then the installer will most likely tell you either at the end of this year, maybe close to Christmas, or only next year. We do know, however, too, that we in principle have enough installers, boiler installers, that is. And so the main question that we are asking ourselves is, how can we make this more attractive? How can we make it more attractive for boiler installers to be retrained to become heat pump installers? Then, of course, we have also looked at the number of things I mentioned in the beginning that we have suggested to the European Commission to organize a Reskill EU Summit. We have also supported the initiative by Julie and Europe On really from the beginning, because we think it's absolutely essential. And we think if we touch a house, if we move towards electrified buildings, then if we touch that house, the installer should really prepare it for everything, for photovoltaic, maybe for a ventilation system, for new electricity that is capable of providing all the electricity to the new demand areas, for battery, and for a charging point and a heat pump. So that at least this electricity installation doesn't become a bottleneck. So what can the member states do? We think that they need campaigns like the ones that Julie has mentioned. We also agree that there is a bit of a structural aspect of craftsman skills not being as attractive as others, as going for study, for example. Personally, I would say if I would have had to take that decision again, I really think I could have imagined to move into becoming an installer. And the number of friends of my son who has just finished school actually doing that, they said, we don't need to go to study. We will take an installer education and then we will become electricians, because they see how fulfilling that work is also. Then we think that maybe there is necessary a need for additional job descriptions, not only a heat pump installer or a plumber, but also a fitter, a person that is really helpful in rolling out mass deployment of heat pumps, but not necessarily being skilled in running a company and in designing the whole system, but really somebody that is executing on the ground. An army of heat pump fitters, you could say it, or an army of heat pump heroes if you want. That we should not forget at the same time that also engineering skills, technical skills are in short supply in universities. And this is not only engineering, it's also programming, coding knowledge, because heat pumps are system integration devices. They will have to communicate with the electric grid, with the other parts of components inside a building. On the EU level, since the beginning of the Renewable Energy Directive, for those not very familiar with the acronym bubble, the acronym is used in the bubble, RED is Renewable Energy Directive, and it's the third revision that we are discussing at the moment. So from the beginning, this directive has foreseen the need for skills and training, but the member states have actually found quite nice loopholes. They simply relabeled all their existing training activities into ready for also renewable energy, and then they were done. I think there is more work needed, and that's why we suggested to the EU, and rumor has it that there is going to be action based on it, that there should be an EU Reskill Summit or a Reskill EU, to use the same structure of these acronyms, summit in which the European Commission makes sure all the member states are on board in the understanding that there is a need for action and to overcome the structural problem that we have mentioned, and that this should be repeated annually or biannually to provide stock taking. Are we moving sufficiently fast? And then lastly, I'm an economist, so I do think that humans are not stupid. So if the cleanest solution is the economically most attractive one, then people will ask for it. And if a boiler installer gets a request for a new heat pump every other day, he will eventually start to think and say, oh, I need to retrain my team. I need to retrain myself. I have to build competence in order to cater to market demand. We also think that this will draw attention for new actors, for example, utilities or building development companies or social housing companies who typically have today installer skills employed as service, as maintenance personnel, that they could make them useful. And if you want to play with the idea of what the Americans did, the Defense Production Act, then I think it would be much more smart to say, let's look at all these skilled military servicemen and servicewomen. Maybe they could also do something, and we could have an army of heat pump installers, an army of renewables installers, and we could bring them to proper use also after this war has ended in the Ukraine. With that, I close, and I'm happy to engage in the panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Thomas. Thank you for changing the slide, Elena. I would ask the panelists to turn on their cameras, please. So we're running just a little bit behind schedule, but it is to be expected. We have experienced some problems related to Zoom. So I will blame Zoom. Having just listened to Thomas's very short presentation, which is appreciated, I would just have two questions. One of them is from the chat. It comes from Lily. She asks, there is a need for 100,000 FTEs in Europe. How many FTEs do we have today, relating to what you had on the slide?
No, I think that's a misunderstanding. Then I didn't make myself clear. We have about 100,000 FTEs today. So if you say we want to double sales, then you double this number.
Okay, so 100 FTEs today, double sales, then double the number. How much would you say time-wise that would take to double the number at the current?
Well, very quickly, we can retrain boiler installers in about a week. So if you do that in 1 year, it will take 2% of capacity out of the market, but then you have it afterwards. And as Julie said already, normally education schemes, if you skill somebody from the beginning, you take 2.5 to 3 years, in some countries even 4. But since this is country level decision, it's not so easy to say. But this other idea, having this fitter, I think that can be done much faster, because these are people that need to be able to operate power equipment, drills, hammers, etc. And then, let me be a bit bold, but I think if you have 2 right hands and you can renovate your house a little bit, then you're probably fit for purpose in 3 months.
Thank you. And then the other question was relating to the Reskill EU Summit. Is there anything that the panelists or the attendees can do to support this initiative? Anything that they can help with? Lobbying someone, talking to someone, participating in something?
Write to everybody in the European Commission and tell them that this makes absolute sense.
We're on it.
Yeah. Yes.
Thank you so much. Then for Julie, one question: what can the EU concretely do to bridge the gap between available and needed professionals? If someone on the street would ask you this, and we live in Brussels, so sometimes that happens probably.
Okay, I would just avoid the rond-point then. Yeah, I think it's a really relevant question, because we feel that the EU has a strong role to play in all legislations across Europe, but the difficulty that we face with the skills and labor market issues is that the EU actually has hardly no competence on skills and the labor market. So it means that it's very much up to member states to act, and then the Commission can guide, etc. So that's why we also the asks that we formulated are rather mild, but because the EU cannot overstep, the Commission cannot overstep what member states do. And as Thomas said, we have 27 education systems, 27 labor markets. So what we are really trying to do, we are trying to remain realistic. Well, first we say that the Commission should, in any case, take action, because they are responsible for designing the Green Deal, and if the Green Deal is not implemented, that's really also on their shoulders. But then what we are trying to do is to use the Commission as a great way to put pressure on member states and guide them into identifying the right priorities. And I think that's, again, this topic for the heat pump development, but really for the whole energy transition. It's a major opportunity to create many new jobs, which will be future-proof. As Thomas said, it will be local, it will be purposeful, it will be evolving, fast evolving. So there's a massive opportunity for all EU and national policymakers to act, and there's also a massive threat if nothing is done.
Thank you so much, Julie. I was just taking some notes there. A question for Jan. I have to say that I really like the unit of learning outcomes. We probably will take that and include in our competency framework, if you don't mind. We have already included the example of bus league. Well, we tried to extract some of the knowledge from your deliverables there. So in a nutshell, could you explain to us again, what is the value of task-based unit of learning outcomes?
Yeah, the core value is that it makes upskilling flexible. For example, if you have someone that is interested in becoming a heat pump installer, after a very short training of a few hours, they are already able to do some of the work properly skilled. And within the weeks, you can build up those competence set by adding more task-based unit of learning outcomes to their curriculum in order to make them more able to do the work. So instead of upskilling them 5 days in a consecutive order, you can spread the time of upskilling while they are already onboarding the sector and getting the work done. And that adds a lot of value because it's not only training, it's also get the practical feeling and get the practical experience. And for me, that's the most relevant value. The other one is the heat pump technology is evolving very fast. And there are a lot of new requirements, for example, for fuse box applications, for smart grid readiness. A lot of new topics are popping up, other refrigerants. And by using task-based unit of learning outcomes, you can pinpoint a development, create a small unit of learning outcome or a set of task-based learning outcomes around it, and publish a short upskilling training. And after following, it can directly be accredited and recognized so that you can see, I have a smart grid ambition. I need to have a smart grid ambition ready heat pump installer. That's it.
Thank you so much. And as just the last question for everyone, I'll just take it in the order that the pictures are put on the screen. So Julie first, what would you say are the most important skills or competencies needed in the heat pump sector? You can choose between 2 and 4 as ever you wish. So the most important skills and competencies needed.
It would be very difficult for me to answer that actually, because I'm not directly involved in the aspect of heat pump installations. But I would say that as for an electrician going into the heat pump market, one important skill, and that's also reflective of all the activities that electrical contractors do, is actually the soft skills. I think that was highlighted by Patrick and a few others. All the soft skills, because you need to be very much more customer oriented.
Thank you so much. The same question to Jan. What would you say?
Yeah, focus on the cross-craft understanding. The heat pump is not standing on its own. It's part of a building. It's part of a system, not only a heating system, but also the grid around it. So you need to be very keen on what other craftsmen do and what's your role in the play or the part of the puzzle.
Thank you so much. What about you, Thomas? What would you say? Of course, you have like 20 seconds to answer until you have to leave.
I think we need to take it serious. We need to make it attractive, and the technologies is there. It is a great profession to work towards the energy transition, and I'm confident that we can make it.
Thank you so much. And Carlos, what would you say to the same question?
No, it's muted. Sorry. Thank you so much, Dan. I think maintenance is a key factor, which in most cases is overlooked. If we don't train sufficiently skilled profiles with high skills on maintenance, these profiles will not be accepted by the market. This is something that has been pointed out also by Patrick in the sense that once the installer have finished their duties, what happens next? And in this sense, customers need reliable maintenance profiles. I think is key.
Thank you so much. And with that being said, thank you so much to all panelists that took part in our event today. I will just very quickly go through the next slides. These are just related to the Heat Pump for All project. But again, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to have you, Carlos, Jan, Thomas, and Julie. And looking forward to having you at the next event.
Thank you.
Bye. So then just moving forward, and thank you, Elena, for changing the slides, because I know we are a little bit time pressed. I will not take more than 5 minutes of your time. This is just a brief analysis of the competency framework that we are working on along with our partners from Heat Pump for All. As you can see, we have already started working on it for a while now, and we still have some months to go until we have to finish it. We've been looking at a lot of other deliverables that are part of our project. All of the deliverables that are part of our project and are relevant to the competency framework, but also they may be relevant to your work as well, are on the Heat Pump for All project website. So you can learn more about the surveys that we did, the interviews that we did, as well as, you know, all the other resources that are available there. Next slide, please. We are also looking, of course, it's still the last one. So let's see if it changes. Sorry about that. So we're also looking into, I'll just say it from memory. We're also looking into other projects from the field that can help us. So basically, we have looked at Bus League, that Jan has so kindly presented. We have looked at Craft Edu. We have looked at the NZEB Roadshow. Any other projects that you're working on and you think are good examples for our competency frameworks, you can very easily write me an email. We will take a look into them and we can include them in the deliverable. I think that there's a lot of work that is going on. So rather than having them a little bit dispersed, we try to include all of them in the deliverable. If you could go back one slide, because yeah, thank you so much. We have also looked into competency frameworks from a lot of other organizations. So for example, we looked at the OECD, we looked at the SHRM professional HR competency model. I think we are also looking internally in our own competency framework. These are all the ones that we looked on. We may find it useful to look into others, but again, we also thought that it would be useful to look into how other organizations are doing their competency frameworks. The next slide, please. And again, if you have any relevant examples that have caught your eye, or maybe even if your own organization has a competency framework that you think could be applied to this, again, I'm very happy to learn about it. And we would be very happy to include it, just to have as much information in one place as possible. The last thing is just the things that that will be happening afterwards. So we're having workshops. This is one of them. We're planning to have another one in about 3 months. This is with actual heat pump manufacturers and what exactly are they doing in terms of training. As you know, manufacturers do a lot of training activities, and we would like to see what they have learned during these activities to include in our competency framework. We will also be conducting interviews. Probably we will put the competency framework draft on the Heat Pump for All website. So these will all be ways for you, the attendees, to interact with us. And of course, we have a lot of manufacturers that are part of EHPA. We have a manufacturers committee, and we will also ask them what the competencies in their value chain, what these competencies and skills should be. So everything we're working on, and we will share with you in due time. Of course, keep an eye out for that. The next slide, please. And the next slide again. The best way to keep in touch with us, to learn about all the events that are happening, all these surveys that we are conducting, interviews, meetings with our members, and so on, is to follow one of our many social media or to just subscribe to our newsletter. You can find everything basically either on our LinkedIn, Twitter, or our weekly newsletter. And the next slide, please. The last one. Thank you so much for joining. Apologies again for the the technical issues. Sometimes even if you test a lot, the platform doesn't behave so well on the day of the event itself. So thank you also for my colleagues, Irene and Elena, that were working at the back end, making sure that we actually can see some slides. And thank you again for the speakers and for you attending. I hope to see you at another event. Again, please keep an eye on our social media, because I think we already have posted 2 or 3 events that will be happening in the next weeks and months, with many more to come as usual. So thank you so much. Have a pleasant afternoon and see you at the next event. Bye, bye, bye.